Welcome back to another edition of the podcast, ladies and gentlemen, live from Blue Wire Studios at the Wynn in Las Vegas, Nevada. It's episode 630. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe on our YouTube channel at Jack O'Hara TV. Rachel Smith, thanks so much for dropping by. You're Miss Las Vegas, according to a lot of people here.
Not according to myself, but thank you. It's so nice. Thank you for asking me to come by.
Absolutely. I mean, I've watched a lot of your content ever since coming out here in Vegas. I mean, you talked about connecting the likes of Chris Van Vliet, amongst others here at Blue Wire, who are part of the network, right?
Well, just kind of love Chris. Been doing, interviews with him forever. He's a fellow journalist, entertainment, obviously podcaster. So kind of gave him a little bit of the lay of the land when he got here. But he's acclimated great. His podcast is doing great. And I think he loves Las Vegas too.
I think, to me, I always tell people he's the nicest guy I've ever met. I've listened to Chris. I've watched Chris's content. He's a huge pro wrestling guy. I'm a huge pro wrestling guy. I've listened to him for like 5-6 years now. And he's just the nicest guy in the world.
Nicest guy and doing some really great work. And by the way, about to be a dad.
That's
so
right.
Very exciting.
Baby girl coming very, very soon.
Get ready for the dad jokes on the podcast. Those will be rich.
Feel like dad jokes, man.
Dad jokes are the best.
I'm like a 50-year-old trapped in a 23-year-old's body, so I understand it.
I wish I was in a 23-year-old body, but that's another story for another day.
So you are a 3-time Emmy Award-winning host, journalist.
That's what they tell me.
That's what your bio says anyway, that you gave me, right?
That is true. Facts. Yes.
You have one hell of a resume. I know you don't think so, but it's like, and it always evolves over time too, like nobody's got a great resume at 25 years old. So
definitely the longer you do this, hopefully the more experiences you have. And I'm just so grateful and appreciative of the opportunities, especially being in Las Vegas has given me, because I started out as a serious, hardcore, evening news anchor doing so I switched entertainment about 17 years ago, and it's been like such a blessing.
Now, did you get into it just because you wanted to be like an on-air talent, or did you want to get into entertainment and like interview the likes of people that you've gotten the chance to interview?
Honestly, my career route, I was like, my whole family is either like, my dad's a teacher, I have a twin sister who's in medicine, so like serious professions. So I always loved entertainment growing up, watching, E.T. and, Mary Hart and everything, but I was more on that news academic path. So being a news anchor, I always thought like maybe I'll be on 60 Minutes one day, but I just love telling stories. And so after being an evening news anchor in Las Vegas and actually in California for a while, I made the switch to entertainment. At that time, they weren't doing a lot of entertainment shows in Las Vegas, so I launched the first one at Fox 5, and it kind of took off because there's so much to cover in Las Vegas. So love covering movies more than murders. It's much softer on your soul.
Oh my God, it's so much more enjoyable, right?
So much more fun.
Everybody's always coming through Vegas too, so it's like you're always going to get just a never-ending amount of great content, a ton of great conversations, a ton of great personalities.
Absolutely, and it's like twofold because I've been able to travel the world doing some of these interviews because before the pandemic, obviously, a lot of that is going to New York or Los Angeles, but also going to movie sets or film festivals, all over the place, which has been wonderful. So that's great. But also, there's so many people who do come through Las Vegas or interviewing headliners. And when you do interview celebrities too, and you're like, there's several people they sit down and talk with, but being from Las Vegas kind of sets you apart because everyone loves Las Vegas. Everyone has a Vegas story to share. So they kind of remember you. They might not remember that's Rachel, but they're like, Vegas, like The Rock used to back in the day. He's like, Vegas, get over here on the carpet. You know what I mean? So
all you gotta do is you gotta wear that one thing that makes you stand out, or do that one thing. Like I feel like Chris always wore suits. Like there was always something about him. It's like, oh yeah, I know Chris. Like, I know Rachel. Of course, Las Vegas.
She's in Vegas, yeah. And you know what? I will wear that proudly because I love this city. I came here for a 2-year contract thinking, I'll go back to I went to college in Washington State. I always thought I'd end up in Seattle. I never knew I would fall in love with this town as much as I did, and now it's just home for me.
When you think Las Vegas, if you're not an original resident here, you just think, oh, the Strip. That's basically it. There's so much more.
Or you just think The Hangover, or you live in a hotel.
Exactly.
It's like, do you see
You're
Bradley Cooper
Caesar's
a lot?
Palace.
I'm like, yeah, Zach Galifianakis and I hang out all the time. The baby's grown up, by the way.
Exactly.
Bartending.
Caesar's Palace, the Bellagio.
Yes.
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
No, I always say what happens in Vegas ends up on our show.
Exactly, right?
Yes. Because truthfully, it's like some of the biggest entertainment stories of the last decade have launched from Vegas. All these huge award shows, the Grammys were here last year. I have friends who work in Los Angeles, which is the number one entertainment market in the country, and number one, it's huge, right? But there's more almost going on every single week and weekend in Las Vegas in a sense of headliner shows and celebrity chefs and new restaurants opening and hotels and stars coming here to party. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So we're never lost for things to cover.
Oh, just when you think like, oh, I can relax this weekend, you get a call like, oh, Sandler and Aniston are coming to town to promote, Murder Mystery 2. You gotta jump on that. It's like, oh God, okay, yeah, absolutely. I'm not gonna say no. It's always an opportunity. You're like, I can't say no to that.
Oh yeah,
just put it on the calendar.
I actually interviewed them for that murder mystery movie, and I'll never forget. Adam Sandler is so funny, by the way. He always tells me, and like, I've only interviewed him probably maybe like 5 or 6 times, but he's like, Smith, you got lipstick on your choppers. Because he's like, I'm like, oh, sorry. Like, I appreciate a fellow, someone who's going to tell you right before an interview, like, oh, fix your hair, or this thing is out of place. But he's, there's people you interview who are definitely different on camera, and those who are just the same, or as you hope they would be, like an Adam Sandler, Jennifer Aniston. It's so refreshing and so great to see.
Like there's a few people that just are kind of just whatever when they're off, and as soon as the camera light turns red, then they're on.
Sometimes the people, I think there's people in this industry who, like, if, The Rock would have been your CPA, it'd be fun doing taxes.
Yeah.
If Hugh Jackman would have been your math teacher, I would have loved calculus, So I think there's some people who are, entertainers who are just naturally gregarious, outgoing, fun people. And then there's people who want to become actors. And so the promotional part is challenging for them. They don't necessarily like sitting down, talking about themselves, touting their projects. It doesn't mean that they're not lovely people or great at what they do, but sometimes when they don't like doing that part of their job, that makes our job harder. But I think that's part of the challenge. I mean, if everyone was like a Matt Damon or Sandra Bullock, it'd be super easy because they're always lovely and, easy to chat with and charming.
Right before we came on, you said that I reminded you of someone. All right. There's multiple people there's multiple different names that have been thrown my way. The first one my mother ever threw at me, my mom, right, was Leonardo DiCaprio.
Oh, I can see that.
I rode that out through freshman year in college when someone came up to me and said I looked like Nick Cage and ruined my confidence completely.
Nick lives in Las Vegas.
And then recently someone said I looked like Daniel Radcliffe because I used to have a giant beard. And that kind of was like, it's better than Nick Cage, not better than Leo.
I mean, Leo's like 50, still dating 22-year-old models, right? So he's had a pretty good, personal life, I would say. If that's what, that's what you're going for.
Yeah.
I think you look like not an actor, but an athlete, a very popular athlete in Las Vegas. Our Vegas Golden Knights, right?
That's
awesome
right.
Hockey team. William Karlsson. Have you ever
I'll
seen
take
Wild
William
Bill?
Karlsson.
You know who that is, right?
I will take
Especially
that.
when you got the flow going. Like, how long is your hair right now? It's like,
ooh, it's like almost to the shoulders. I got the Eddie Vedder vibe going on.
oh,
right now,
Eddie
right?
Vedder, one of the best concerts of all time.
I
Pearl
know,
Jam.
right?
I mean, I went to college in Washington
Amazing.
State, okay? Like, that was Eddie Vedder. Oh my gosh, legend. Still legend.
He did Innings Fest a few weekends ago. I was just mesmerized. I was like, oh, I've seen Pearl Jam perform live many times before, but Eddie Vedder alone with a guitar is completely different, a completely different experience.
So good. One of the best voices in rock of all time, don't you think?
I think he's got the most beautiful voice of all time.
This could be like an Eddie Stan account, right? Or what do kids say now? Ship, not Stan?
Exactly right.
Yeah, try to keep up. You know what I mean?
It's constantly changing. The evolution, the wheel just keeps on turning and turning and turning. But
by the way, William Karlsson, since we are talking about your doppelganger here, when I interviewed him, such personality, he's saying we have something in common because I love the Backstreet Boys. I have a PhD in boy bands, if you don't know, and he's saying a little, you are. I won't do it, but he's saying a little, Backstreet. I want it that way. Do you sing?
I don't. Well, actually, there are tracks out there. My brother's a musician, lived in Nashville for a long time.
Nice.
I recorded a few tracks during COVID. Wasn't too bad. Wasn't too bad.
Can you give me some Backstreet Boys on the spot?
I can. I was more of like a Scott Weiland, Stone Temple Pilots, just like screaming into the microphone type guy.
STP. I mean, now listen to this. You're more of a rock guy.
1,000%. Which is odd for again. I'm 23 years old. In 2023, you don't get that. You don't get. It's like, oh, you don't listen to rap. You don't listen to hip hop. I don't.
Oh my gosh.
If you like, I know who Post Malone is. I know who A$AP Rocky is. I know who Kid Cudi is. I think there was someone on the radio the other day. It was just a mainstream guy, and I'm like, I've never heard of this person before.
Listen,
and everybody thought I was nuts.
It's whatever. I think I like all genres really. I used to not love like country music. Now I'm a huge country music fan because all these headliners we have, and besides, country music's a lot different nowadays. It's kind of like country pop. We like Keith Urban, Luke Bryan. By the way, I think we should have more rock residencies. I interviewed Def Leppard. They were here a few years ago.
Oh, they'd be
awesome.
perfect.
They were so good. And it's so funny in Vegas, people are always like, what time should I get there for the show? I'm like, well, it depends. Love J-Lo, but if she starts at 8, probably about 8:30. We're like getting drinks at the bar, and it's like 5 to 8, and you're like, doom, doom. I'm like, Def Leppard's starting at 8:08.
Yep.
I mean, 8:00. And I'm like, when I interview, I'm like, you guys started right on time. They go, well, what bloody hell? What time do other people start? That's a horrible British accent, by the way. I'm so sorry. I'm like, usually like 20 to 30 minutes late, Vegas time. But nope, they get on stage right on time. So,
so polite.
right? So British.
Oh, that's so cool. I mean,
or maybe they're just tired and they want to go to bed earlier. They've rocked a lot.
I'm trying to think, like Def Leppard's a good one. Motley Crue would be a good one to have a residency out here. Unfortunately, a lot of rock bands aren't together anymore because someone died or like two people got into a fight. It took Axl and Slash like 25 years to hash it out and get back together.
I know.
Poor Taylor Hawkins just died last year. That was like the one band that was pure for 25, 30 years. And
that was such a
they
loss.
lost him. I met him 2 weeks before he died.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, that was, I mean, honestly, like such a shock still. Like there's times you kind of catch yourself realizing, Prince had a residency here years ago, which I saw. And you're like, sometimes you think, oh my gosh, these people aren't here. It's like, I would have loved to have seen Whitney Houston have a residency.
Right.
If she could have gotten, herself healthy and everything. What a voice she had. And so, but we do have so many great, Diana Ross plays here at the Wynn, John Fogerty. I love like in Las Vegas.
John Fogerty's awesome.
If you have the goods, if you have the real talent and you got the fan base, it doesn't matter. You can be whatever age. And there's like no ageism in Las Vegas. I mean, Cher sells out. I mean, we've got all these headliners of different ages who are just killing it, which I'd love to see.
So in your line of work, to kind of shift gears, as much as I love talking about celebrities, we're going to continue to talk about celebrities.
Whatever you want. I'm here for anything.
My number one goal in this industry is to do what you're doing, what Chris is doing, what I'm trying to think so many different names out there that I'm going to butcher, who I just see like in those junket interviews, getting 5 to 10 minutes on the movie set, watching the movie beforehand, asking questions, with the biggest names in the industry, whether it is like a Dwayne Johnson or a Jennifer Aniston or a Sandler or Mark Wahlberg or any of these people that I grew up watching and like idolized, right? Like that's why I got into this 6-7 years ago. I'm like, I want to do a show to interview my heroes one day. Dave Grohl is probably the number one guy I'd want to interview. Like, what is that like for you? Because in this podcast space, we can just like relax and talk about whatever for as long as we can, right? Or until 5:30 today. But in a 5 to 10, like you might only have like 3 to 5 minutes in a junket interview. That's where it's like you can't really be like relaxed and just be conversational. Like you try to keep it as conversational as possible, but you also have to get into specific questions to make it interesting for them because they're just sitting in a chair and then all of you guys are coming in one by one, asking them all a bunch of different questions.
Absolutely. But I think what's so funny is people always say, oh, they probably get asked a lot of similar questions over and over, but everyone has a different personality. Everyone has a different style. Obviously, there's things I'm sometimes thinking I would like to ask, but my style's kind of been, I want to have a conversation with them like I would have with anyone else. I think one of the greatest things I've been, striving for my whole career is that I'm pretty much the exact same off camera as I am on, which so whether it's, for good or bad, that it is, Rachel is who she is. I mean, even like sometimes when you're sitting down, I used to be really, when you first start, you're so self-conscious and everything. And I'll never forget years ago, I was doing an interview, like, Brad Pitt, hello, right? And I didn't and I'm like, oh no, like my little, I wasn't put together. I was like, you know what? Now I sit down, like, hold on, got to fix this, make sure the girls are in. And they're like, Rachel, you're like in front of, so I'm like, they're just people too.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll reach over and say, does this look okay or whatever? I'm like, listen, you know what? They're just people. They just do a great job. They're very lucky to do. And interviewing them, I think if you have a conversation, what I think a lot of people do is they go in with a set amount of questions that they want to make sure they ask. A, B, C, D, E, right? And sometimes it's like they're telling you the story or they're going to go down this path and people don't follow them because they wanted to ask this question or this question. And you're going to miss this great gem because they're going to tell you something new and unique and something different. So I sometimes have ideas about what I want to ask, but then kind of just let the conversation flow and see where they take me.
Exactly. I used to have like 5 to 10 bullet points when I used to do interviews starting out in college. And now I'm just like, no, it's like, I know a few things. People like you will give me your bio. It's like, okay, I know 2 or 3 things. We'll see where the conversation goes. I know what I want to talk about going in. It's why I invite guests on the show, right? Like you should know what you're doing, but you should have a conversation with someone at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And also too,
how boring is it when you're just like, oh, great.
Question 1.
Anyways.
Yes. I mean, and the funny thing too, you're asking about wanting to do this. I'm sure you will. You'll get there. I mean, you're so young. You already have a beautiful podcast here at the Wynn Las Vegas.
Yeah,
I mean, that is like, come on, that's goals. That's huge.
Time.
You've got plenty of time. But I think too, the more you do it, the more comfortable you get. I mean, now some of these celebrities I've interviewed, 10, 20, 30 times. I mean, like Channing Tatum, I'm like, hey again, you know what I mean? So because you do it so much, they start to get to know you, you know them a little bit on a personal level. I'm not going to ever say they're my buddies or my friends, but there are some that you have gotten to know on a personal level because they also, when they see you time and time again, they feel comfortable with you because you're not asking them maybe embarrassing questions or sometimes like there's been, a scandal. And listen, my job is not to make the celebrity happy, it's to make the audience. Your customer is your viewer, the one who's going to watch that. I want the celebrity to have a good time, but most importantly, if someone does a huge scene in a movie, like, Brad Pitt runs naked through the field, I don't care if 10 other people ask him about it. If I don't, my viewers are going to be like, Rachel, you didn't ask about the most important moment,
Right.
So you have to ask your own style, but my personality is different than yours or someone else is doing interviews. So you have to be true to yourself too and what you need to do.
What was the most difficulty you had when it comes to, like, let's say there was a scandal going on or there was something that the publicist was like, hey, before you go in there, please don't bring this up. Like, and obviously you got to respect because you're not going to be invited back if you overstep those boundaries.
I think there's ways to do it. Like, again, you don't want to be just only asking questions they want because you're not being a journalist then, right? You're a PR person then for the star of the movie.
Yeah.
I remember years ago, Gerard Butler and Jennifer Aniston were doing a movie together, and it was out in the press that they were dating. And so there's kind of like, don't ask about, no personal questions or whatever. And so you always wait to, if you have the hard question, you always wait till the end. Ask about the movie, about the project
Worst case,
first.
it blows up at the end. You already got the other
You don't
content.
start with, who are you sleeping with? The question one, I really like to know. But so I waited till the very end, and I thought, there's a way to do it. And so I just said at the very end, I had about a minute or two left. I said, so Gerard, just real quickly, I want to make sure I get my dress out of dry cleaning. The save the date for the wedding with Jen, was that the Tuesday next week or is that next Saturday? I want to make sure, like, I was joking, like, because I just want to make sure I got, I'm available to come, And he goes, oh, Rachel, he's like, we're not dating, we're just, and bleep. And I was like, he goes, but I'm so flattered. Usually I'm attached to Fuglies, but I got a lovely. Like he was, okay, this is an awful accent again, is what, Scottish? But he made a joke out of it. He didn't say, oh, I can't talk about that or whatever, because he still made a joke. He didn't give me anything, but I basically asked a question in a fun way, didn't insult him, didn't offend him, and he had a funny moment with it. Again, he made it a little bit R-rated and saucy, but you can do things in your own way.
As someone who gets interviewed a million times, you almost have to come. It's like this is their content, but it's also like I'm the center of this content. I have to make it entertaining, no matter what they ask me, even if it does make me uncomfortable. In the back of my head, I can't just be like, "Oh, no comment."
And
that just looks bad.
Come on, no comment, or I can't talk about that. No. And actually, in my career of doing this almost over 15 years, I've had very few times a publicist has said, "No personal questions. You can't ask this." Usually, I mean, when you've been invited there, they know you, they know your reputation, they know you're not going to embarrass somebody, but also do the job you're there to do. And if there is something going on in the press that you need to ask about, you'd be remiss if you didn't. I'm going to do it, but in a respectful way.
How many quote unquote newbies do you see in there that are just like being vetted by people?
I mean, I don't think they're on their first junket or the first, like, they're not probably in front of a major star right away, but it's like, of course, I mean, we see more of an influencer environment now because that's so prominent and popular, but I literally, for the last 15 years, there's a lot of the same faces I see over and over. I mean, of course, your National Entertainment Tonight, E! Access Hollywood, and then there's probably about maybe 10 of us from Houston, New York, Chicago, Seattle, Phoenix, doing these interviews, and it's like a little junket family. I mean, we've traveled the world together. Some of these people I've done interviews with and the press family, I know better than, people I work with here in Las Vegas. I mean, It's been crazy. I mean, we've been to Rio for Fast Five. We've been, Spain, Vienna, Austria. We went to Russia for Transformers. So it's been amazing to go. And it's fun to get these interviews when you're not in a hotel room, just like in Los Angeles, and you're on location at the movie set or at the world premiere. They let their guard down a lot more. There's sometimes press parties. Sometimes you see them out of their element, I mean, for the Transformers world premiere, I mean, they're like DJing and celebrating. And, it's really fun to see stars in that capacity too.
Man, that's the dream.
It's been nice.
When you go to some of these places like Spain or Russia, like you're there on assignment. How quick are those how quickly are those turnarounds? Because those flights are hellaciously long. But at the same time, it's a quick turnaround.
Oh, yeah. And as glamorous as it seems, there are so many times, especially back in the day when we didn't have Zoom and everything, I would be staying up till like midnight or whatever to feed your, interviews back so it could, get to your station, could air that night. I mean, but it's funny because over the years, one of the, best experiences I've had is interviewing Tom Cruise. I mean, for the last 10 years, he does everything big. I mean, he's a true, I think the biggest movie star in the world. And he not only has us come out to where they've shot the movies, but he's put us in stunts. I mean, we went to, I think it was Salzburg, Austria, and they had us like harnessed in, and we like jumped from building to building, the same stunt that he did. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, oh my gosh, like think like Tom Cruise, like be cool jumping. And I was like, wee, and I was like, oh my God, it was like more like Peter Pan than it was Tom Cruise, but it was so fun. And then we did this thing where Cameron Diaz drove us in a drift car and we chased him around the streets of Spain, and he was, on a Ducati. I mean, like crazy, right? I mean, these are like, stay in school, kids, because you can do things like this. It's really been an amazing opportunity. So I'm forever grateful for.
On that topic, do you think you needed a degree to get into it?
Do I think you need one? My route was the traditional go to like local stations, work as, a reporter, an anchor. So a 4-year degree is needed, like broadcast journalism. I had a double degree in broadcast journalism and political science. And so I think that gives you the foundation. And I totally recommend too, going to these smaller markets. I mean, I carried my own camera gear. I shot my own stories. My very first job, I made $15,000. Okay. My twin sister was in medical school at the time at Northwestern, and I got my first reporter job in, Washington State. And she goes, well, 50,000 is not bad for your first job. I'm like, 15, not 50. So you have to really love what you do, because, you work a lot of Christmases, you work a lot of holidays. It's very hard personally, but I think if you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work. It feels like a great opportunity that's exciting every day.
And it's a part of your identity, or at least it becomes that way. Like for me, it's like, I didn't make anything off of this the first few years, right? And it's just like, I never even thought of it. I wanted to do this.
Yeah.
It didn't have to do anything with money. And then once money gets involved, then you figure that out another day. But it's a part of me. It's a part of you. It's a part of everybody else that's in the industry, because you're not starting out making anything glamorous.
Nothing. I mean, my dad's a school teacher, so I had parents who did jobs that they were passionate about that weren't lucrative. So, I never came from a lot of money, so I always wanted to do something I loved. So that was important to me. And I think too, like all the things you get are priceless, the experiences you've had. So I've enjoyed it.
Oh my God,
so
as a
much.
storyteller, you have just an endless amount of really cool stories. Like ridiculous stories.
Who do you want to know about?
Who haven't you interviewed that you want to interview?
I feel like the one that got away. I mean, and I've had a couple opportunities to interview her, and it's like I had a personal family issue where I couldn't go, and then something else happened so I've talked to some people again so many times for, Meryl Streep is the one I've never sat down with.
I feel like that's someone she's doing more now than she did in her prime.
I mean,
she's still in her prime.
I've talked to Julie Andrews and, every, major star you can think of, but Meryl Streep, who is, I think, the GOAT of acting. So Meryl, if you're out there, you can come to Vegas. We'll interview you here, Blue Wire.
She's doing the, what's the Selena Gomez and Steve
Only
Martin.
Murders in the Building.
Only Murders in the Building.
Yes.
She's on this season.
Yep.
Right?
So maybe, you got to manifest it, right?
You got to make it happen, right?
Absolutely. I mean, like you said, you talk about your heroes, people you want to, I always thought, listen, any celebrity or any actor who I admire for their talent, not because they're famous, not because they're wealthy, but because they're talented or because they're really kind or they give back. Those are people I really have loved interviewing over the years. But there's people that you personally, as a kid or someone growing up that you just loved. I mean, for me, Dolly Parton.
Yeah.
I mean, my gosh, getting to interview her a few times now has been absolutely a joy. The late, great Olivia Newton-John. I mean, there's no girl out there who ever watched Sandy and Grease and didn't want to be Olivia Newton-John, or any guy who wanted to get to know her. And so I got to know her on a really nice level when she was here as a headliner. And oh my gosh, it was so lovely. My mom was going through breast cancer, which she had battled, and wrote her a letter, sent her a signed CD. Like, it's so lovely when you get to meet people that you have just admired and respected for so long, and get to see them on a personal level, and they even surpass your wildest expectations. So she's been one. Cher, I've interviewed her a few times, and she's hilarious. Mm-hmm. She's a hoot. I mean, she's so funny. We did a picture after Burlesque, that movie, and Stanley Tucci's sitting there. He's like, "Do you want me to leave?" I go, "No, honey, I'll just crop you out later. Sorry, Stanley." But it's like,
No
I want the
way.
picture of Cher. She's like, "Stanley, scoot over. Let Rachel get in here." Again, another bad impersonation. Do you see why I've not ever gotten a comedy show in Vegas?
It's hard. Comedy's I used to do
So
stand-up
hard.
comedy a little bit.
Really?
Well, okay, like open mics, and I got invited to a few clubs, but it's hard.
It's hard, but the comedy scene's getting huge in Las Vegas. I mean, you guys have here at the Encore Theater some great comedians.
Sebastian Maniscalco,
Yes.
residency for the year, I think.
Yeah, I just talked to him for his new movie that's coming out next year about my father with Robert De Niro. I mean, Eliza Schlesinger is here this weekend. So you have great people here all the time.
That's what I keep saying. Like, it's never a bad time to be here because everybody's just in and out all the time. Los Angeles, too. It's another 4-hour drive from Phoenix, but you make it work. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Idaho.
Idaho.
Like
Okay.
the one with the, potatoes. So
Right.
very small town, but went to college in Washington State. My twin sister went to school in Chicago and stayed there. So worked in, Seattle, worked in California, but I've been now here for 17 years. Came here as an evening news anchor and then switched over to entertainment, and it's been such a blast.
What's the least exciting thing about your job that you'd say for people who want to get into this and just see all the glitz and glamour, like, oh, interviewing stars and like getting to be on all these press releases, but like there's grit moments when it comes to anything that you want to do. That's why you truly have to love it. What's kind of one of the more things that you don't necessarily get excited about every day?
Well, I get a lot of, that's a great question because a lot of people reach out and say, oh my gosh, I want to like hang out with, Matt Damon or Sandra Bullock on a weekend. And, it's they don't understand how much goes into it. And I would say to people who want to get into this, really think about it because there are so many personal sacrifices. You know what I mean? Like, as far as giving up so much of your weekends. This is not a 9 to 5. I mean, when I first started, I was a morning anchor, going to work at 3 a.m. Then I was an evening anchor, going to work at 2 p.m., getting off at midnight. And then with these celebrity interviews, I mean, you work weekends, you work crazy hours. You have a lot. If you have a boyfriend or a partner, you would have a lot of trust because you're flying around, you're staying in hotels. So you have to realize too, you're doing a lot of traveling, a lot of legwork for a 5-minute, 10-minute interview. Yep. So if you only like that part of it, if you only like the being on TV part, I say this is not the right profession. I mean, even interns come and they'll be like, when are we going to do an interview? Or when are we going to go do a red carpet? I'm like, what do you mean? We're writing stories for the show. We're researching. We're calling. We're getting back to that publicist about a pitch they made. So it's so much more of a hustle, of a grind, of work that is not glamorous. In fact, very much not so. There's a lot of criticism too. Like if you don't have a thick skin, being a person on television, you have to be okay with yourself because especially now with social media, if someone doesn't like what you're wearing, your hair color, makeup, whatever, they let you know. I mean, most people by and large are so kind and so supportive and even jump in if there's someone who's mean. But if you are very sensitive, you are thin-skinned, this is a very tough profession for that as well.
What was the one project that you wanted to do so bad that you either pitched or just like tried to manifest for so long that it just never happened? They turned it down. The talent wasn't cooperative. The publicist wasn't cooperative. Like you have one that you look back on and think like, man, I wish that would have happened. That would have been so cool.
You know what? I can't really
Lucky
think of,
you.
No, I'm not saying that everything I've ever wanted has come true. I mean, like, Lenny Kravitz still hasn't called. I'm saying.
Right.
Lenny. No, by the way, I'm manifesting that residency too.
Yeah.
Lenny. Don't you think, Lenny Kravitz?
That'd be a good one.
Light, love, and abs. I mean, just because I have a major crush on Lenny, which I have interviewed him once before too, and that's when you have to when you personally are drawn to somebody, you're like, be professional. Rachel, be professional. But I can't really think of, because I think that, I always dreamed I wanted to be a broadcast professional and wanted to be telling stories. I wasn't really I didn't care if it was like radio or I loved writing. So it wasn't about the being on TV part. It was, I wanted to tell people stories. I used to think about CBS Sunday Morning, these great, storytelling. Love that show. So I really haven't thought, I'd love to do this or I'd love to do that. These opportunities sometimes come to me that have been bigger than I think I could have dreamed. So I think sometimes I've been in these situations. I mean, years ago, they sent us to Bora Bora for the Vince Vaughn movie Couples Retreat. And people at the station were like, where's Rachel going next? They're like, to Tahiti for work? I'm like, I know. You must feel like, oh no, I'll bring back gifts for everybody. But so I think there's some things that have happened that that have been beyond my imagination. And I just, again, sometimes you're so grateful because all that time you spend working and, toiling, there are those moments that really pay off.
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of people out there where I think timing is everything. Obviously, when hard work meets opportunity, that's what creates luck, right?
And being appreciative, I think, too.
Being grateful, appreciative of everything, too.
And not thinking you're the star. I mean, there's so many times I cover red carpet, and some of the photographers are like, hey, Rachel, come, walk and get a picture. I'm like, no, honey. I'm going to my spot. I'm going to be the one interviewing. So never get confused. I mean, you're a journalist.
Yeah.
And even though we're on TV and that has some kind of a sheen to it, you're the one doing the interview.
Oh, yeah. Remember why you're there in the first place.
Yes, stay humble. Because some of the reasons we like these stars so much is because they're grounded, they're humble, they're down to earth. So remain that way.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who get into this and just want to be on TV.
Absolutely.
I've seen it on the up and up, and then people are like, oh, that person was mean to me. It's like, yeah, that's life. Some people are mean, some people aren't great. I've had a few interviews that I've said publicly where I'm like, yeah, they were not the person I thought they were. Did you have any of those that you'd be willing to share publicly?
Sure. I mean, here's the thing. people are like, oh, would you ever talk about bad experiences?
Yeah.
If you are sitting in front of a camera and doing an interview that's going to be on TV and you're rude, what? I'm not going to pretend. You know what I mean? Like that's on you. I mean, years ago, I was interviewing, and I think a lot of people know him for being tough, but Oscar winner Tommy Lee Jones. And after the first interview with him, I'm like, well, I think my performance deserved a Razzie, not an Oscar, because I was just like so defeated. And I later learned, oh, he loves to give reporters a hard time. So after the years, of interviewing more times, I'm like, I would just try every approach, whatever. One time I asked him a question, he just kind of grunted at me. He was like, huh? And so I used that in the promo. They're like, he's the most feared man on the junket circuit. Is Rachel brave enough to go one-on-one with Tommy Lee Jones? And we cut to, I'm like, because that's all you gave me. So I think it's kind of funny because I think he has sport of it now. But years ago, I remember Russell Crowe was kind of challenging. And he was in a movie and he was sitting there with his director. And it was a movie that was honestly not one of his best, okay? And so I was trying to ask him some fun questions about Vegas. And he turned, and again, I love Russell now, but he turned to his director and he was like, oh, this is going to be the highbrow interview of the day.
Yeah.
And I kind of, because we sit so close, I kind of kicked his leg. I go, no, honey, this is the decidedly lowbrow interview of the day. This is Vegas, and we'd like to have some fun. His whole demeanor, he sat up, he performed, he was like so respectful, because I feel like when you remind them, I'm not just here for you to I'm doing my job too. Help me help you. Yeah. I'm trying to promote your project. So, and then after that, so I think sometimes if someone is being a little bit not their best or even a little bit disrespectful, you can remind them, no, like don't just cower because they're a celebrity. Like, you deserve respect too. Mm-hmm. And again, he's been great since, and it wasn't even that bad. I was just like, no, honey, you're not going to turn to somebody and say, I wasn't trying to be highbrow. You already talked to PBS, okay?
Right. You just lean into it.
Absolutely. But by and large, I would say 99% of interviews I've done, people are so gracious. They're so lovely. I think the bigger the star, the better they are.
Yeah.
I think they're the group that sometimes is
they're
challenging.
More groomed to it.
More groomed. And I think that's why they get hired so much. They're so likable and talented. It's kind of like these reality housewives or, some of these newer Bravo celebrities that sometimes have new fame. And so they want to kind of show you what a big deal they are. Those can be sometimes tough.
Oh, yeah. Well, in today's day and age with podcasting, so many social media influencers out there who think they're a big deal. It's tough sometimes, but there's so many other legit. Do you think between athletes, actors, actresses, rock stars, business people, who do you think's the toughest group of people to interview? Who do you think is the most kind of just oh, I don't want to do this today? I feel like actors and actresses are in it all the time. Athletes are in it all the time.
Yeah.
Some athletes aren't necessarily. They don't really need to be on all the time. It's oh, just talk about my performance, whatever. It could be as monotone as how I'm talking right now. And no one would care. They'd be like, oh, Aaron Judge, you crack me up, man. And you didn't even say anything that funny. But it's he doesn't have to be a character where actors and actresses do. In my experience, rock stars are tough.
They can be. I think it's so funny, though, because in the music industry, I think by and large, country music stars are the best because they're so down to earth. They're so good. I watch how people are not only to the press, but their fans. And that's what really impresses me. If you get to a premiere early and you see that star show up so he can sign autographs or she can take pictures with the fans, not just the obligatory 20 minutes before the movie, that's what always impresses me. I think country music stars, actors are great. Some of the music stars who have a huge entourage, it's hard to get to them or get real moments, but red carpets are hard. That's why I like one-on-one interviews, and especially if you're on location, they're always more at ease, I think.
Man, I mean, that's really, really cool that you've gotten to do all of these opportunities and at the same time kind of almost do everything that you've wanted to do.
Not everything. I mean, there's
there's still time.
That's right. I'm not 23.
There hasn't been an opportunity where it's oh, that passed and it didn't happen, there's still time to interview people.
Of course. I mean, I just launched my own show last year. After 15 years of being on a local station, I launched Lights, Camera, Vegas. Yeah. So it's great because it's, celebrity, movies, music, but always with love to Las Vegas and with a core of what's going on here. And it's so great because we found that we have viewers all over, from London. Now we're on in Australia because everybody loves Las Vegas. They want to know what's going on here. I mean, I just interviewed Sebastian Stan and Julianne Moore, and they were like, can you get us Adele tickets? I'm like, sure, let me call her, but everybody's invested and interested in Vegas. And this city just keeps getting bigger, better, and more exciting. And I love it.
And I love being here too. And I'm going to be here a lot often. You're going to come back on the show too, because I have a lot more I want to ask you about.
Anytime.
But we're going to get cut off here in the next 60 seconds. So I will wrap this one up. This was episode 630 of the podcast. Where can we follow you?
Rachel Smith Vegas on Instagram. And I think, oh my gosh, Rachel Vegas TV on Twitter. I don't know. I just got on the TikTok, so now my nieces my
TikTok.
nieces think I'm cool. They're like, Rachel, it's not the TikTok. But yeah, Instagram's probably my main way.
Sweet. Well, Rachel, I appreciate you so much for coming on the show today. And
Thanks for
episode
having me.
630, guys, check it out on the YouTube channel. Like, comment, and subscribe at Jack O'Hara TV. Check it out.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, there's so much more.
I feel bad. I'm sorry that we didn't get as much time as we'd hoped.
No worries.
Hope my impressions weren't too bad.